This is an update on the Air India crash, Flight 171. This is going through an article that's on strikeengine.com. I'll put a link to the article in the video description. So starting off the article, there is a lot of speculation about the causes of the Air India crash, Flight 171 from India to England. In this article, I'll cover the main theories so far to see if they add up and identify which of the theories about the crash make the most sense. And a quick disclaimer, I am not an aviation expert. So first theory, pilot error. This one came from a big reputable aviation YouTube channel. The YouTube channel proposed that the pilot reduced flaps instead of lifting the landing gear when they were taking off. It turns out that the levers for the landing gear and for the flaps are in different places in the cockpit, and it's not likely to have happened. And even if it did, I think I'm right in saying that the plane should have had more than enough power to overcome this issue. At the time of writing, I don't think there are any other theories out there that suggest that pilot error was the cause, and I think generally pilot error for the Air India crash is not on the agenda anymore. Coming on to the flaps theory, this was another huge one. I think this one's also been quashed if I'm reading the situation correctly. The theory said that the flaps were not in the correct position, and this is what caused the plane to lose altitude. The plane wasn't able to generate enough lift with the flaps in the wrong position. So from what I've read on this, a number of things have pushed this theory off the table, at least for me. First is that the plane should have had enough power to overcome an issue like this. The second, if the flaps were in the wrong position, the plane's computers would have told the pilots about it, flashing lights, buzzers, etc., and it would have been in a way they could not ignore or could not have not known about. And thirdly, there have been photos of the wreckage that appear to show that the flaps were in the correct position. For example, I think this one is from Indian Express. Fuel contamination, another big one, and I think I'm correct in saying that this is still on the table, and I think it's one of the most popular at the moment. However, I'm skeptical about this theory for a number of reasons. The biggest reason I'm not convinced is that the thrust from both engines was equal for the entire flight, which suggests that each engine had exactly the same contamination at the same time. I mean, I guess it's possible, but probably unlikely. I didn't see any unusual movements with the plane as if it was trying to correct for more power from one side than the other. Secondly, there was no smoke whatsoever, at least in the footage that I've seen. There was no smoke whatsoever from the engines, from either engine, which suggests to me all the fuel entering the engines was being burned completely and properly. I would expect, as a non-expert, to expect at least some puffs of smoke from at least one engine if the fuel that they're being asked to burn is not correct. And thirdly, there are sensors in the fuel tanks of the 787s to detect contamination, e.g. if there's fuel which contains water. Yes, fuel contamination could be the cause. I guess all these things apart, I mean, it still could have happened, I guess, but I think it's unlikely with the information that I have at the moment. Another one, twin engine failure. The theory is that both engines failed in some way at the same time. I'm assuming that when people say twin engine failure, they're talking about something going wrong inside the engines themselves. So this is a 787 Trent engine, super reliable. I think the chances of both engines suffering an internal failure at the same time is extremely remote. And again, we don't see any signs that the engines are malfunctioning in the videos, obviously apart from the apparent lack of power that they're producing. There's no smoke at all. It doesn't appear to be any unevenness in the power between the engines. So personally, I'm ruling the twin engine failure, something going wrong in these engines. I'm ruling that out. Bird strike, probably not a big one. Maybe there's a chance there were some birds on the runway, but from what I've seen of bird strikes, they do tend to cause a bit of fire and a bit of smoke. There's a video in the article showing a demonstration of Madeira Airlines hitting a bird. There's nothing like that in the video of the Air India crash. Again, the engines appear to be operating completely normally, obviously apart from the fact that they don't appear to be giving enough power. So with regards to the bird strike, I'm ruling this out also, and I think this one's generally been ruled out by everybody. Another big one, probably more towards the start, I think less now, is the landing gear not retracted. This is another theory that was pounced on by some aviation experts on YouTube as an obvious error by the pilots. They're saying if you have a power problem especially on takeoff, you retract the gear to reduce drag as soon as possible to keep the plane flying, to give it the biggest chance possible for it to keep flying. And these aviation experts on YouTube, they jumped to the conclusion that the Air India pilots failed to pull the gear up, and this in some way brought the plane down. However, someone has released a video showing how the landing gear on a 787 works. It's basically an engineer. So this engineer basically does a walk around of the landing gear, how it works, what's supposed to happen when, and what configuration it's supposed to be in. And there's a more to the point one here showing the 787 how the gears actually work. Basically, I'll just summarize that in words. You can watch the videos if you want. They're linked to in the article. When the plane is coming to land, the front of the gear, i.e. the wheels towards the front of the plane, they will be tilted upwards. In the videos of the Air India crash, at least the ones I've seen, the landing gears appear to be level, or perhaps even tilting slightly forward. In other words, the videos of the Air India crash suggest that the pilots did actually instruct the landing gear to retract, but the gear only made it partway through the sequence. The fact that the landing gears only made it partway through the cycle would suggest that the plane had some sort of hydraulic pressure failure or issue. And an additional thing that suggests the failure of the hydraulic system was the deployment of the RAT, the ram air turbine, which is supposed to give some bare minimum hydraulic pressure and electrical power, if the videos I've seen prove to be accurate. So having said all that, someone has commented the following, that the doors to the landing gear compartments were not down, and this suggests that the gear was not instructed to retract. So again, if you look at this video here, it shows how the doors move in relation to the angle of the wheels. And apparently these doors drop by gravity, and therefore they would still work even if the plane had hydraulic failure. So long story short, this person saying, if the pilot said, I'd ordered the landing gear to retract, those doors would have come down, even with hydraulic failure. But then they also say, additionally, the landing gear tilts forward as the plane takes off. So they're saying that as soon as the weight gets off the landing gear, these wheels will tip forward, like the front of them will be lower than the rear. And for me, that last sentence makes me doubt the entire comment. How would the landing gear know if the plane was going to remain airborne or touch down again? Maybe those doors don't come down under gravity. There is some hydraulic resistance on them. So at the moment, this is another theory I'm dismissing, that the pilots didn't pull up the landing gear. And even if they had the landing gear down, I still think there should have been enough power for the plane to take off under normal circumstances. Another one, Sabotage. I don't hear this one being talked about very much at all, probably because there's no evidence to suggest it. But did the pilots deliberately fly the plane into the ground? It wouldn't be the first time I've put a link here to a famous incident where a pilot has crashed a plane with passengers on board. But again, I've written here, the fact that the RAT appears to be deployed suggests that the plane was experiencing a major mechanical electrical issue at the time. So unless more evidence comes forward, I think we can ignore this theory that there was any sabotage by the pilots. Incorrect flight data. Did the pilots input incorrect flight data into the flight plan, and did this lead to the flight computer giving inaccurate takeoff settings? So here is a video just showing how pilots enter the flight details into the flight computer. It's a very interesting theory, I think, this, and I think my use of terminology, it's obvious that I don't know anything about the computers or what effect it has on this plane or any aeroplane in general. But I would say this: if the pilots did make a mistake and enter the wrong weight, for example, say they said the plane was 180 tons while it was actually 227 tons on takeoff, I would like to think that during the takeoff they would have the ability to add more thrust than the computer suggested in order to take off. I mean, I would hope that just because the pilot has entered the wrong weight accidentally, the plane wouldn't then limit the amount of maximum thrust available to the pilots. I'm assuming the plane would not limit the power capability due to inaccurate details in the flight computer. And with that assumption, I'm going to say that this theory is probably also extremely unlikely. ECU safe mode, and so far I think this is the most likely theory on what led up to the crash. A complete shutdown of the electrical system due to a failure of the generator control units, the ECUs that control the generators. I'm presuming when the generator control units shut down, all electrical power is lost except for power provided by the RAT, and potentially this could lead to the fuel pumps shutting down also because they are electrically powered. This would lead to fuel starvation in the engines, and this would explain the apparent complete loss or minimal power coming from the engine and also the deployment of the RAT. It would also explain the apparent simultaneous shutdown of both engines at the same time. So it's just a quick graphic here showing the electrical makeup of a 787 versus a traditional airplane. The generator control unit ECU problem has been covered here and here. It's flight data, and I think in the Guardian. I've linked to both articles if you want to go and see them. However, I think it should be noted that this is apparently unlikely for the ECUs to be powered over 240 days continuously. Apparently this is the condition that puts all these ECUs into a fail-safe mode. Nevertheless, as a layman, this issue would fit what I have seen in the photos, i.e. a simultaneous, complete, well, almost total loss of engine power. If the engines are not getting any fuel, I think that would not produce any smoke, fire, anything like that. It would just be lack of power or minimal power. So in summary, the Air India crash, what makes the Air India crash bizarre is that there isn't anything obviously wrong with the flight. If the crash site was actually a runway, I think to all intents and purposes, it would have looked like a normal landing. There was no smoke, no flames, no unusual movements, nothing. Any single system failure is unlikely to bring a plane down, and I think it's safe to say that even with one engine inoperative, the plane could still take off. One engine has enough power to power the airplane into flight. For me, for two absolutely key systems, the engines with backup and redundancies to fail at exactly the same time with no outward indication that they have failed, suggests something major has gone wrong, and that something has to be linked to both engines, i.e. something that controls both engines. And at the moment, the GCU fail-safe mode ticks all the boxes. I'll just quote The Guardian, which I've linked to above, what they've said in their article. A software bug, when they're talking about this GCU going into fail-safe mode, a software bug that causes a complete electrical shutdown of the Boeing 787 and potentially loss of control of the aircraft. This is what happens when these ECUs have been on for over 248 days continuously. The fuel system on a 787 is almost entirely electrical, and no electrical power equals almost no fuel to the engines. Almost, because the engines can suction feed from the tanks, but the power needed for takeoff, I think, cannot be sustained by suction alone. Maybe in cruise conditions, suction is enough to keep the engines going, but I think for takeoff, the suction method is not enough. Again, something that would explain maybe the engine still running slightly, but giving nowhere near enough power. At the moment, with the information I have, and as a layman, GCU failure seems the most likely. These are my thoughts on the Air India crash of Flight 171 at the time of writing. If I've got any updates for this, guys, I'll probably do another video if there's anything breaking that's seriously different to what I've done in this video. If you enjoyed the video, you want to see more videos like this, obviously subscribe to the channel, give it a like if you've got time. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you again in the next video.